homeless mechanic sleeping in the back of a rusted pickup truck, doesn't expect to be a hero. But one night, when Jake hears a scream in a dark alley, he doesn't hesitate. With nothing but a wrench and instinct, he saves a young girl from two masked kidnappers, and then she disappears without a trace. No name, no thank you, just gone. The next morning, as Jake returns to scavenging junkyard parts and fighting off hopelessness, a sleek private jet lands at the nearby airstrip. The door opens, and out steps the same girl, dressed in designer clothes, guarded by a silent entourage. Her name is Emily Wexford, tech heiress, billionaire, and daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country. And she's looking for Jake, not to repay him with money, but to offer him something far more dangerous, a second chance. What unfolds next is a story of trust built from broken parts, of sabotage, sacrifice, and an unlikely partnership that sparks a quiet revolution. Because sometimes the most extraordinary legacies begin not in boardrooms, but in junkyards, where forgotten people fix the world one bolt at a time. In a forgotten corner of the city, where crumbling buildings cast long shadows and time seems to move slower, a man named Jake sleeps in the cab of a rusted-out pickup truck. The windshield is cracked. The heater doesn't work, but it's his. A faded tarp flaps quietly over a pile of tools in the truck bed. Not much to look at, but they were once his livelihood. Now they're all he has. Jake used to run a garage, the kind of place where neighbors knew your name and trusted you with their cars, their stories, their lives. But that was before the fire, before the economy collapsed, before the dishonorable discharge that stripped him of more than just a uniform. It took his name, his pride. Now he calls the edge of the scrapyard home. No walls, no roof, just the cold steel of forgotten machines and the silence of people who stopped looking him in the eye. But Jake isn't bitter. He still rises with the sun, brushes the dust from his worn flannel shirt, checks the sky like it's got answers, and he still keeps his tools sharp, because a mechanic, real mechanic, never lets his tools go dull, even if the world thinks he's finished. That night, the city hums with a different kind of tension, the kind that seeps into your bones. In the distance, sirens echo, but Jake doesn't flinch. He's heard them too many times to care. Then comes a sound that does stop him, a scream. Not the kind from a TV in a nearby apartment, not drunk laughter or angry shouting. This is raw, real, a voice in danger. Jake's instincts kick in like an old engine suddenly coming to life. He grabs the tire iron resting beside his seat, slips out of the truck, and moves through the shadows. Quiet, fast, deliberate. Years of military service may have left him unwanted, but they didn't leave him untrained. At the end of a narrow alley, he sees them. Two men, one vehicle, and a girl struggling against the arms, holding her tight. Her voice cracks as she kicks, pleads, fights. Jake doesn't think. He just moves. The first man doesn't see him coming. A solid swing sends him crashing into a dumpster. The second turns, pulls a knife, but Jake's already inside his reach. Disarm. Disable. Down. Silence. The girl trembles, still too shocked to move. Jake offers a hand. She stares at it like it's the first safe thing she's seen in a long time. "You okay?" he asks, voice low, steady. She nods slowly, then suddenly bolts into the darkness. No name, no thanks, just gone. Jake watches her vanish into the maze of alleyways and wonders if she was real at all. By the time the cops arrive, too late as always, the alley is empty. Jake's bleeding from a shallow cut. No witnesses, no cameras, just another ghost in a city that forgot how to care. Back in his truck, Jake lights the last cigarette he owns, stares up at the stars barely visible through the city haze. He didn't save her for thanks, or recognition, or redemption. He saved her because someone had to, and because a real mechanic doesn't throw things away just because they're broken. Not engines, not people. The next night, the city feels off. The kind of off you can't quite name, but it sticks to your skin like humidity before a storm. Jake notices it immediately. The scrapyard is quieter than usual. No dogs barking, no drunks singing to the moon, just stillness. He sharpens a chisel on a whetstone, listening. Nothing, until that sound again. Not the scream this time. Something more subtle, more out of place. Tires skidding, soft footsteps on gravel, a car door slamming in a place it shouldn't be. Jake slips out of his truck like smoke. His boots make no sound as he crosses the lot. Then he sees it, headlights flickering against the broken wall of a nearby warehouse. A black SUV idling, engine running low, tinted windows, no plates. And there she is, the girl, same one from the night before, standing under a flickering street lamp like she belongs there. But her shoulders say otherwise. She's not trembling this time. She's still. Waiting. Jake narrows his eyes. That's no accident. This is a meeting, and from the look on her face, she didn't plan it. From the shadows, Jake watches as a man in a suit steps out of the SUV. Expensive haircut, cheap intentions. He says something to her, low and fast, gesturing toward the car. She doesn't move. Then another man steps out, bigger, bulkier, less words, more threats. Jake's hand tightens around the wrench in his pocket. He should walk away. He should stay out of it. But that's never been his style. The bigger man reaches for her, and that's all Jake needs to see. He crosses the lot like a storm rolling in. No one touches her, he says, voice like gravel and gunmetal. The men turn, confused, amused, until Jake moves. The first blow knocks the bulky guy sideways into the SUV. The second sends the slick one to the ground, groaning, blood on his collar. Jake doesn't speak again. He doesn't need to. He just stands between them and the girl, and for a moment, just a breath, everything is silent. Then tires squeal, doors slam, the SUV speeds off, its lights vanishing into the night. Jake turns to the girl. "Twice now," he says, shaking his head. "You've walked right into trouble," but she isn't scared. This time, she smiles. "You didn't have to do that," she says. Jake shrugs. "Didn't plan to, just hate bullies." Then she does something strange. She reaches into her pocket, pulls out a card, and presses it into his hand. "If you ever need anything," she says, her voice steady now, "call this number." And just like that, she walks away, not running this time, not scared, just walking, like a woman who already knows how the next part of the story goes. Jake looks down at the card. No name, just a number and a symbol, a sleek silver logo he's seen once before, on a news report about billion-dollar tech empires and armored limousines. Jake laughs to himself. Of course. Of course the girl he saved in an alley is connected to power, but the real surprise isn't who she is. It's that he can't stop thinking about her. Not just her face, or her fear, but the way she stood tall the second time, the calm in her voice. Like maybe she's not just running from something, maybe she's running toward it. Jake tucks the card away, climbs back into his truck, and stares into the night. The city just changed, and it started in his alley. It started like any other cold night in the alley. Just Jake, the cracked pavement, and the taste of rust in the air. But that night, something was different. Jake had just finished warming his hands over a makeshift heater, a metal can, and some wood scraps, when the sound of tires skidding pulled his gaze to the shadows. Then came the scream, high, sharp, terrified. Jake didn't wait. He sprinted through the alley, slipping past dumpsters and broken glass. And then he saw her. Two men, one girl, same one. She fought like hell, but they were bigger, faster. One had her by the wrist. The other was reaching for the duct tape. Jake didn't speak, he just moved. The first man didn't even see the wrench coming. Steel met skull, and he dropped like scrap. The second lunged, swinging a tire iron of his own. But Jake caught it midair, twisted, and drove his knee up hard. The girl fell back against the wall, breathing fast. Blood on her lip, dirt on her jeans. Jake stepped between her and the unconscious men, breathing hard. "You all right?" She nodded, blinking fast. "They were following me. I didn't know where to go." "You came to the right alley," Jake muttered. For the second time in 2 days. He'd saved her. But this time, someone had planned it. Jake helped her sit against the brick wall while he checked the men. Unconscious, breathing, probably not for long. Police would be here soon. He didn't want to be around when they showed. The girl coughed, wiped her mouth, and looked up at him. "Who are you?" she asked, studying him like he was the mystery. "Just a guy who fixes things," he said, not meeting her eyes. But she kept watching him. Her gaze wasn't afraid anymore. It was curious, calculating. "You've done this before," she said softly. Jake didn't answer. She reached for something in her pocket, a slim wallet, thick with cash, and tried to offer it. Jake pushed her hand away. "Keep your money." "Then why help me?" Jake paused. "Because someone should have helped me once, and didn't." Silence. Then sirens. She stood quickly, limped a little. "I have to go." Jake frowned. "You need help." She shook her head. "I can't be seen here." Then she was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the alley. And Jake stood alone again. But something lingered in the air. Something more than fear or adrenaline. That girl wasn't just in trouble. She was being hunted. And Jake had just stepped into a game he didn't understand. They always show up late. Red and blue lights flooded the alley 20 minutes after the action was over. Cops stepped out, hands on hips, flashlights cutting through the dark. Jake sat on a stack of old tires, bloody rags pressed to his knuckles. They asked questions, wrote things down, didn't look him in the eye. Homeless man, former military, no address, no alibi, no badge of honor anymore, just a worn-out ID, and an honorable discharge turned into a dishonorable whisper. "You saying you took out 2 guys with a wrench?" the officer asked. Jake nodded once. "You want a reenactment?" The officer didn't smile. Another one asked about the girl. Name, age, what was she doing here? Jake shrugged. Didn't ask. She was scared. That was enough. They didn't like that answer. Didn't like that he had nothing they could type into their system. So they ran his prints. Checked old records, found the garage fire, the court dispute. The military note is sealed in red ink. "You've got a history," one officer said. Jake looked up, tired. "Yeah, and I still saved her." They didn't arrest him, but they didn't thank him either, just left him in the alley, alone again, like a ghost in a city that only sees what it wants to. The next morning, Jake woke to sunlight cutting through the windshield, like a blade. His knuckles ached. His ribs were sore. But he was alive, and for once, someone else was too because of him. He stepped out of the truck, stretched, and headed toward the back of the junkyard. That's when he saw it, a thermos, sitting on the edge of a rusted workbench. Still warm, next to it was a note, just 3 words. "Thank you, Jake." No signature, no number, just his name, written in looping handwriting. He hadn't told her his name. She must have asked around. Jake picked up the thermos, unscrewed the cap. Coffee, black, still hot. He looked around. Nothing but old tires, twisted metal, and silence. She was gone. Again. But this time she left something behind. Something that felt dangerously close to trust. Jake spent the rest of the day doing what he always did. Fixing things that didn't matter. He tightened bolts on an old lawnmower, tried to get a busted scooter running, repaired the same pipe in his camper for the 3rd time that month. But his mind wasn't on any of it. It was back in that alley, back in the way she looked at him, not like he was trash, but like he was solid, dependable, safe. He didn't know her name, didn't need to. But something about her voice, her eyes, the way she kept showing up in places she didn't belong, it stayed with him. And deep down, Jake knew this wasn't over. The knock came just before sunset. Jake wasn't expecting anyone. Most people avoided the junkyard, but this knock was calm, purposeful. He opened the door to his camper and found a man standing there. Black suit, black shoes, earpiece tucked neatly behind one ear. No smile. "She'd like to see you," the man said. Jake raised an eyebrow. "She who?" The man didn't answer, just gestured to the car parked nearby. A black town car, polished, purring quietly. Jake should have walked away, but something in the man's eyes said, "This isn't an offer. This is a moment." So Jake grabbed his coat, shut the door behind him, and got in. The car pulled away from the junkyard like it had never been there. They drove for almost an hour, through the city, then past it, out to a private airstrip ringed with old trees and newer fences. Jake didn't ask questions. He watched the sky. Then it came, sleek, silent, powerful. A private jet touched down on the tarmac like it was made of silk and fire. Its body gleamed under the golden hour sun. Engines hummed as it coasted to a stop. Jake stared as the door opened. And there she was, the same girl from the alley, but not the same. Now she wore a tailored coat, designer boots, a quiet confidence in her step. No bruises, no fear, just fire. "Hey, Jake," she said softly, "told you I owed you one." Jake blinked. "You've got a jet," she smiled. "That's not all I've got." They sat on the edge of the tarmac, the roar of the engine fading behind them. "My name's Emily," she said, "Emily Wexford." The name didn't register until it did. Wexford, as in Wexford Dynamics, security tech giants, billion-dollar contracts, global reach. Jake let out a low whistle. "You're that Emily," she nodded. "The men in the alley? They weren't random." Jake leaned back, tension rising. "Who were they?" "Business rivals, hired muscle. My father's enemies. It's complicated." Jake looked at her, trying to square the billionaire with the girl who bled in an alley. "You let me think you were some runaway." "I was running," she said, "but not away. I was looking." "For what?" She met his eyes. "For someone real." Jake didn't say anything for a long while. He just stared at the woman sitting across from him. This girl, who once looked like a scared alleyway kid, now revealing herself as the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country. "You're saying that whole thing, the alley, the guys in the SUV, was about you?" he asked finally. Emily nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Not just me, my family, my father's company. Wexford Dynamics has made some enemies over the years. People who don't like that we design systems to keep people safe. Jake's jaw tightened. And what were they trying to do? Ransom you? Worse, she said. They wanted to use me to make my father fold on a defense contract, but I didn't give them the chance. She looked away for a second. I got away, hid for a night. Then they found me again. Jake shook his head. And you ended up in my alley. A faint smile tugged at her lips. I guess fate has a strange GPS. He didn't laugh. You should have gone to the police. She nodded. I know. But the police can be bought. The people after me. They've done it before. I needed to disappear. To see who would actually help me with no cameras, no headlines. Just kindness. Jake leaned back in the folding chair. He could still smell the jet fuel lingering on the breeze, still taste the metallic bitterness of distrust. And I passed your little test? Emily looked at him seriously. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything. You just acted. Jake snorted. Didn't know I was auditioning. You weren't. I was hoping. For a moment, silence settled between them. The sun dipped a little lower, casting long shadows across the runway. Jake glanced at the jet, then back at her. So what now? You fly off and leave another note and a thermos. Emily stood, brushing off her coat. Number this time, I'm offering something different. He raised a brow. Money. She shook her head. A partnership. He laughed, dry and sharp. Lady, I live in a truck. You fly in jets. We don't exactly speak the same language. Maybe not, she said. But we understand the same things. She took a step closer. Jake, you didn't just save me. You reminded me of what matters, of why we started our company in the first place, to protect people, to build something real. He looked away. I'm not interested in being a PR stunt. You're not. You're something else, something the world needs to see again. Jake didn't answer. Emily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slim silver envelope. Just think about it, she said, placing it beside him. She turned and walked back toward the jet. Jake watched her go, the envelope untouched beside him. He didn't need to open it to know it contained something valuable, maybe a contract, maybe something more. But right now, all he could think about was how a girl who should have been on magazine covers had ended up bruised and terrified in his alley, and how he, the guy sleeping behind a scrapyard, had somehow become the one person she trusted. The jet lifted off into the crimson sky, leaving behind a low hum and a cloud of disbelief. Jake didn't move, just sat there, the envelope in his hand now, thumbing the edge like it might bite him. Inside was no contract, just a handwritten note. This wasn't my father's idea, it's mine. If you want to keep fixing engines, do it. If you want to fix something bigger, call me. E. It wasn't what he expected. No logo, no legalese, no dollar signs, just a choice. Jake folded the note and slid it into the breast pocket of his worn flannel. He didn't know if he was angry, inspired, or just confused. Probably all three. That night he walked the scrapyard like he always did, flashlight in hand, checking the fences. Old habits, rusted instincts. But his mind wasn't on the junk. It was on her, the girl with bruises on her face and purpose in her spine. Emily Wexford. He'd seen people like her on screens, surrounded by glass offices and bodyguards. But she'd stood beside him in a filthy alley and faced danger with nothing but her voice and fire in her eyes. And she chose him, not the police, not private security, him. Not because he had influence, not because he was marketable, because he did the right thing when it counted. The next morning, Jake found a crowd outside the junkyard. Photographers, reporters, a few men in suits with guarded smiles. He didn't answer a single question, didn't unlock the gate, just climbed back into his truck and closed the door. Later that day, a plain manila envelope arrived, slipped under the side gate. Inside was a second note from Emily. Don't let them twist the story. Call when you're ready, or don't. Either way, thank you. Jake stared at the note long into the evening, and by the time the stars blinked over Detroit's sky, he'd made a decision. He wasn't ready to call, but he was ready to listen. 2 days later, the suit came back. Same one from before. Slick haircut, tailored jacket, polite like a man who never gets told no. He didn't knock this time, just stood by the chain-link gate holding a branded envelope like it contained the Holy Grail. Jake looked up from under the hood of an old motorcycle. His sleeves were rolled, hands black with grease, sleeves torn at the elbow. Real work doesn't come clean. The suit raised the envelope. Miss Wexford asked me to deliver this personally. Jake didn't take it. Look, the man continued, stepping forward. This isn't about charity. It's an opportunity. Emily wants to back you, help you rebuild. Get off the street. You're a hero, Mr. Rourke. Jake wiped his hands on an oil rag, staring at the man like he was selling snake oil. Is that what I am now? Jake said. A headline? The man cleared his throat. There's a full offer inside, housing, equipment, a salary. You'd never have to turn a wrench in the cold again. Jake stepped back. Tell Emily something for me. The man straightened. Tell her I don't do favors in exchange for shackles. I fixed something that was broken. That's what I do. You don't have to name it or dress it in gold. The man's lips parted, trying to recalibrate. But this could change your life. Jake's voice was even, unflinching. So can a lie. He turned and walked back into the junkyard, leaving the envelope fluttering in the dust. Later that night, under a flickering work light, Jake sat in the back of his truck, flipping through an old notebook filled with sketches, bike mods, engine maps, suspension rebuilds. His entire life was reduced to pencil on paper. He looked at Emily's first note again, the one that mattered. Fix something bigger. The words hit differently now, not a command, an invitation, but he needed to know who she was when the cameras weren't rolling. Because a real mechanic doesn't patch something unless he's sure what caused the break. There's a reason Jake sleeps behind a junkyard and not in a shop with his name on the sign. 10 years ago, he owned one. Rourke Auto and Salvage, a 2-bay repair shack tucked into a Detroit corner where people still waved at each other. It was never glamorous, but it was his, until it wasn't. He never talks about what happened. Not the fire, not the court case, not the dishonorable discharge that came before it all. But sometimes at night, when the wind dies and the city finally shuts up, the memories return like ghosts in grease-stained overalls. Jake had served in the Army's mechanical corps, tanks, transports, anything that ran on oil and wheels. But one day they asked him to sign off on a field repair that would have compromised a convoy's safety. He said no. They said he was insubordinate. He left the military with nothing but a wrench roll and a bad reputation, started his shop from scratch, swore he'd never cut corners for anyone again. Then the fire came. Arson, they said. An accident, said the insurer. The truth never mattered. He lost it all. The business, the reputation, the home above the garage. And nobody came to help. Until Emily, a girl in an alley, bloodied, bruised, and asking for something real. Jake closes the notebook, leans back against the cold metal wall of his truck, and stares at the Detroit skyline in the distance. He's not afraid of rebuilding. He's afraid of building something that gets taken again. But then he thinks about the way Emily stood her ground on that airstrip. Not as a daughter of wealth, but as someone who'd been scared and chose to fight. Maybe they're more alike than he wants to admit. Maybe the world does need something rebuilt. And maybe, just maybe, she's not offering him a lifeline. Maybe she's offering him a partner. Jake hadn't set foot near the old garage in almost 5 years. He wasn't even sure it was still standing, just a burned-out shell on the corner of 12th and Waverly, left to rot when the insurance company walked away. But today, he stood in front of it again. Emily had sent him the address. No fanfare, just a message. Thought you should see what's still yours. The roof had caved in long ago. The sign, Rourke Auto, was scorched. Letters hanging half-melted like they'd cried during the fire. Inside, the air still smelled like ash and metal, charred walls, cracked concrete, a ghost of the life he'd built with his bare hands. Jake ran a palm across the old steel support beam. The scorch marks were still there. So were his father's initials, welded into the corner. He remembered late nights tuning carburetors by lamplight, neighbors dropping by with their kids' busted bikes. The shop had been more than a business. It had been home. "You built something that mattered here," Emily said, stepping beside him. Jake didn't answer at first, just stared at the ruin. Then finally, "I never got to say goodbye." "You don't have to," she said, "because I'm not asking you to leave it behind. I'm asking you to build it again." The food truck was busted, radiator cracked, battery corroded, brake lines worn down like threadbare jeans. Emily had bought it at auction for a few $100. She didn't say why, just rolled it into the junkyard one afternoon and handed Jake the keys. "Let's fix something together," she said. So they did. He showed her how to bleed the brakes. She surprised him by knowing how to swap the fan belt. Her hands weren't soft, either, he noticed that. There was callus on her palms, history in her fingers. By sunset, they were elbow-deep in grease, laughter bouncing off rusted walls. When the engine finally turned over, roaring like a beast waking from a long sleep, Emily grinned wide. "You still got it," she said. Jake just shook his head. "It's never been about having it. It's about doing it." She looked around at the scattered tools, the dented workbench, the broken lights, and nodded slowly. "This isn't a junkyard," she said. "It's a proving ground." He didn't say it out loud, but at that moment Jake knew. Something was shifting, not just bolts and engines, but them. Two people who'd been broken in different ways. "Now we are learning how to fix things together." Word travels fast in Detroit. By the end of the week, the old crew started showing up. First came Benny, an ex-con turned welder who used to help Jake patch truck beds before the fire. Then Marisol, a local baker who used to trade pies for oil changes. And Pete, old Pete, retired Navy and half-blind, showed up with his oxygen tank and toolbox in tow. "Didn't think I'd ever see this place breathing again," he said, running his hand along the side of the food truck. They didn't come for money. They came because Jake had once fixed things for them when no one else would. And now they saw the smoke signals again, the kind that meant hope was leaking through the cracks. Emily watched it all unfold, quietly, from the corner. She saw how people looked at Jake, with trust, with gratitude. And for once, he didn't flinch from their praise, because this time he wasn't doing it alone. It was past midnight. The food truck now hummed quietly beside them, fully restored and gleaming under the moonlight. They sat on the back bumper, sharing a thermos of coffee and silence. "I used to come here when I was a kid," Emily said suddenly. "Not this garage, but ones like it. My mom took me on rides to parts shops and scrap yards, said real learning happened in dirty places." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You weren't raised in penthouses." She laughed, but there was a shadow behind it. "Not always. My mom died when I was 13. After that, it was boardrooms and backroom deals. My father didn't know what to do with a daughter who wanted to weld instead of waltz." Jake looked at her, really looked. "Why me?" he asked. She sipped the coffee, choosing her words carefully, "Because you didn't ask for anything, and because when the world stopped seeing me as a person, you still did." He nodded once, no speeches, just understanding, because beneath the soot and silence, two people were starting to see each other, and that changes everything. They drew the plans in the dirt with a tire iron. Jake sketched a rectangle, mobile garage. Emily added solar panels. Jake circled the axle design. Emily added modular shelving. The dream was taking shape, a mobile mechanic unit, one that could move through neighborhoods, fix what dealerships overcharged for, and train vets and ex-cons, the people who always got left behind. "We don't need a franchise," Jake said. "We need an army of fixers." Emily nodded, eyes gleaming. People who see the person behind the machine. They worked until dawn, surrounded by silence and sunrise. What they were building wasn't just a business, it was a movement. The boardroom smelled like leather and polished silence. Emily sat at the end of the table, across from 8 suits who never turned a wrench in their lives. "You're jeopardizing shareholder confidence," one said, tapping a report. "She's aligning us with a homeless man," another added, eyes narrowed. Emily didn't flinch. She simply pulled out a photo of Jake, smiling, grease-stained, surrounded by a team of mechanics and neighbors. "This is who fixed your car when no one else would," she said. "This is who saved my life. And this is the future of our company." There was silence. And then the threats came. "Pull out now or lose your seat. Stop funding that garage or step down." Emily stood, eyes fierce. "Then I stepped down. Because some things are worth more than titles. Some stories are more powerful than numbers. And some people, once broken, are the ones who know how to build the strongest things." Emily stood alone in the elevator, watching the numbers light up as she rose toward the top floor of the Wexford Dynamics building. For the last time, she had made her decision. No more boardrooms filled with hollow eyes and empty words. No more silence traded for comfort. No more pretending her name meant something if it didn't stand for anything. The elevator dinged. She stepped out, heels clicking against marble, every suit in the room turning as she entered the boardroom again, this time not as their figurehead, but as herself. "I'm not here to fight you," she began, setting a small stack of papers on the table. I'm here to free myself from you." They looked confused. Then I was alarmed. "This is my resignation," she continued, "effective immediately." A murmur swept through the room. "You're walking away from billions?" one man asked, half shouting. "No," Emily said. "I'm walking toward something that matters." And with that, she turned and left, stepping into an elevator that didn't rise, but descended. Back to the garage, back to Jake, back to where real things were built, with calloused hands and honest hearts. That day, Emily traded a kingdom of glass for a legacy of steel. They stripped the truck down to its frame. Old Chevy, rusted edges, cracked windshield. Jake had lived in it for years. Now it would live again as something more. They welded aluminum panels, reinforced the chassis, installed a solar battery rig, and outfitted the sides with sliding drawers, compressed air, and a tool wall that could make any pro shop jealous. The mobile garage was born, painted in matte black with red trim, her name scrawled across the side in careful stenciled letters, "Fix Forward." Jake stared at it for a long time, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't think I'd ever see her like this," he muttered. Emily grinned. "She's not your truck anymore, Jake. She's your legacy." Jake blinked hard and nodded. "Then let's make her earn it." They rolled her out under the sun, engines humming, tools ready. The garage was now on wheels, and it was ready to change lives. The first recruit was Dee, a single mom who'd once rebuilt her entire transmission with nothing but a borrowed toolkit and YouTube videos. Then came Marcus, an amputee vet who could diagnose engine trouble by sound alone. They didn't come for paychecks. They came because Fix Forward gave them something else: dignity. Every misfit, every cast-off, every forgotten soul who could turn a wrench was welcomed. No resumes, no background checks, just grit and trust. Emily handled logistics. Jake trained. The garage crew became a family. They parked in school lots, churchyards, and abandoned strip malls, offering free repairs, vocational workshops, and quiet redemption. People stopped seeing them as broken and started seeing them as builders, the ones who put things back together, not just vehicles, but lives. They mapped the city like medics mark a wound. Red dots for broken-down school buses, blue ones for families who couldn't afford repairs, yellow for local garages who'd refused veterans or ex-cons. Jake's team rolled out, street by street, fixing what others had abandoned. At first, people were wary. No one trusted free. But then the work spoke for itself. Grandmothers brought in walkers needing new wheels. Teenagers rolled up with bikes with more duct tape than frame. A nurse with 3 jobs burst into tears when they fixed her overheating sedan for nothing. No one asked for IDs, just stories. And slowly, Detroit began to listen. News crews showed up, donations trickled in, then surged. But Jake kept his head down, still started every day with coffee, still closed each job with a handshake and a "you're all set." Because change doesn't come from headlines. It comes from doing the work, one socket wrench at a time. It started with slashed tires, then a brick through the garage window. Jake shrugged it off. Kids, maybe. The city had its ghosts. But then came the note, taped to the hood of Fix Forward's mobile unit. "Stop fixing what we control." No name, just a threat. Emily read it twice. Her jaw clenched. This isn't about you, Jake. This is about who you're helping. Jake nodded grimly. They think they own the broken. He checked the cameras, changed the locks, kept working, but it didn't end there. One night, returning from a job site, they found the mobile garage broken into. Tools stolen, panels pried open. Jake stood in the wreckage, breathing slow. "You okay?" Emily asked, and he nodded once. "Yeah." Then he picked up a wrench from the floor, his father's wrench, the one that had somehow survived. "They want a war?" he said. Emily nodded. "Then we give them one. Because no matter how much they break, Jake would always rebuild." The alley felt too familiar. Same cracked pavement, same stuttering streetlight. But this time Jake wasn't just passing through, he was waiting. He'd gotten the call an hour earlier. Joey, one of the newer mechanics, had gone missing after a late-night repair job in Rivertown. Never checked back in. His last message was shaky, rushed. "Someone's following me. I think they know who I work for." Jake didn't wait for Emily's approval. He grabbed the old truck, the backup, not the fix-forward rig, and drove into the city with nothing but a flashlight, a tire iron, and that familiar burn in his chest. The burn that said someone crossed the line. He found Joey's phone first, smashed against a dumpster, then a boot print, drag marks, and then voices, low, cruel, laughing. Jake crept toward the sound, breath steady. Two men, faces shadowed, stood over Joey, tied, bloodied, and slumped against a wall. Jake's grip tightened on the tire iron. He recognized them, the men from the alley, the same ones who'd tried to take Emily weeks ago. So it wasn't random. It never had been. These weren't just hired thugs. They were part of something larger, a network that profited off silence, fear, and control. And now Fix Forward had disrupted that. Jake didn't speak. He stepped into the light and let his tools do the talking. The first man went down fast, a flash of elbow and steel. The second pulled a knife, but Jake wasn't 17 anymore. He wasn't a scared soldier being told to stand down. This time, he fought back. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't clean, but it was fast, and it was final. When it was over, Jake was bleeding from his brow, but Joey was free, gasping thanks as Jake cut the ropes loose. "Why?" Joey asked, dazed. "Why would they come after me?" Jake helped him up, steadying him. "Because you matter now, because we all do." Back at the garage, Emily was already waiting. Joey limped inside, eyes wide with gratitude. Jake followed behind, bruised but calm. Emily looked at him for a long second, then nodded. "You saw them again?" "Same two," Jake confirmed. "Same agenda." Her face hardened. "Then we're not just a nuisance to them anymore. We're a threat." Jake picked up a hammer, tested its balance. "Good." "Jake." He turned to her. "This doesn't end with tire irons in the dark," she said quietly. "We need to bring the light. Make this public." Jake nodded slowly. "Are you ready to tell the whole truth?" he asked. She took a breath. "I think it's time." Because the fight wasn't just in alleys anymore. It was everywhere, and from here on out, no one was hiding. The next morning, Jake walked into the garage before sunrise. No coffee, no radio, just him and the silence, thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. He picked up his father's wrench, tested its weight in his hand, and set it down on the workbench like it was a declaration. Then he went to work, steel plates welded over the windows, motion detectors rewired from scrap, a reinforced door bolted to the tool room. The garage, once open and easy, was turning into something else, a fortress. Emily arrived an hour later, hair pulled back, face unreadable. She watched him reinforce the bay doors with thick chain links. "Are we expecting a siege?" she asked quietly. Jake didn't look up. "I'm expecting resistance, and this time I want us ready." She crossed her arms, considering. "They're not going to stop." "I know." "They're connected, powerful." Jake paused, wiped sweat from his brow. "So are engines. Doesn't mean they can't be taken apart." By mid-morning, the whole crew was there. Dee, Marcus, Joey, bruised but stubborn, even old Pete. They didn't ask what happened. They just picked up tools and joined in. A silent understanding passed through the garage. No more running. This was their ground now. Jake took inventory like a general. Everyone got tasks, reinforced the mobile unit, triple-checked the cameras, set up backup generators. He even rigged a few surprises. Motion-triggered floodlights, high-decibel alarms, a set of smoke canisters left over from an old salvage job no one asked too many questions about. But Jake wasn't just preparing for a break-in, he was preparing for a message. "We're not just fixing cars anymore," he told the crew that night, gathered around the old workbench. "We're fixing what's broken in people's lives, and that makes us a threat." He looked each of them in the eye. "I need to know if you're still in." Dee nodded first, all the way. Then Marcus, "Let 'em come." Even Joey raised a shaky hand. "They'll have to drag me out." Jake felt something shift then. Bigger than fear, stronger than pride. It belonged. This wasn't just a crew of misfits anymore. It was a family. Later, after the others left, Emily stayed behind. Jake was welding in the corner, sparks dancing like fireflies around his boots. "Why didn't you walk away?" she asked, leaning against the tool chest. Jake didn't answer immediately. Just finished his weld, then pulled off the mask. "Because I've spent too much of my life letting other people decide when I'm done," he said. "Not anymore." She stepped closer. "They think they can scare you." He smiled faintly. "They're welcome to try." She studied his face, scarred, tired, unwavering. "You know," she said softly, "when I first met you, I thought I was testing you, seeing if someone still did the right thing when no one was watching." Jake looked at her. "And now? Now I think you're teaching me why it matters." They stood there in silence for a long time, surrounded by sparks, steel, and unspoken trust. Outside, the city moved like always. Cars passing, lights glowing, threats lingering in shadows. But inside that garage, something powerful was taking root. Not just resistance, resilience. It was supposed to be a routine install. Just a new lift system in Bay 2, the one they'd scrounged from 3 broken jacks and a prayer. But when Jake pulled off the access panel near the corner camera mount, he found something unexpected. A second camera. Tiny, professional, not one of theirs. He stared at it for a long moment, then followed the wiring. It led into the wall, through conduit, into the floor, and out into the alley. He didn't need to trace the whole line. He already knew what it meant. "Emily," he called. She appeared from the tool room, wiping her hands. "What is it?" Jake held up the camera. "We've been watching, for weeks." Her face tightened, not with shock, but recognition. "Not by the people you think," she said slowly. Jake's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Emily hesitated, then reached into her jacket and pulled out a small tablet. She tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward him. And there he was, Jake. Footage of him saving Joey, fixing a little girl's wheelchair, teaching Marcus how to torque an engine, hugging an old woman whose car he'd rebuilt for free. All of it had been recorded. Jake looked up, disbelief and fury mingling. "You bugged me." "No," she said quietly. "They did." The room shifted. Emily sat down slowly, like the truth itself was heavier than steel. "My father's team has been monitoring everything I've done since I left the company," she said. "They didn't want me going off script. Didn't want me throwing the Wexford name behind a so-called charity mechanic with a criminal record." Jake's jaw clenched. "I didn't know they were using surveillance until last week," Emily continued. "I confronted them, told them to stop. They didn't." Jake paced the garage, fury buzzing through his steps. "They've seen everything, heard everything." "Yes," she said, "and that's how we win." He stopped. "What?" Emily smiled, not with amusement, but with strategy. "They recorded your integrity, Jake. Every refusal of payment, every midnight repair, every time you put someone else first." Jake frowned. "And?" Emily stood, fire rising in her voice. "We leaked it." An hour later, the footage went live. Emily's assistant, Thomas, uploaded a polished version, a short documentary titled The Fixer, a quiet, powerful portrait of Jake and the Fix Forward crew. Within minutes, it caught fire, not just views, belief. People shared it, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. A man who fixed more than machines. A crew that gave second chances. A story that reminded the world what goodness looked like. Jake watched it all happen from his battered laptop in the break room. Silent, humbled, the man who once slept in a truck behind a junkyard was now the face of a movement. By morning, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. News vans parked outside the garage, local stations, national outlets, even a call from someone claiming to represent a streaming platform. Jake refused all interviews. He had spark plugs to clean. But Emily, she was ready. She appeared on every major network, sat calmly under bright lights, told their story without buzzwords or spin. "This isn't about tech," she said. "It's about trust." The Fix Forward model became the centerpiece of panel discussions. "Can repair be revolutionary?" One headline read. "From homelessness to heroism," said another. But not everyone was celebrating. That afternoon, Jake received a letter with an embossed seal. Brunswick Mobility Corporation. Cease and desist. "Patent infringement," Thomas said, scanning the papers. "They're trying to shut us down before we scale." Jake exhaled through his nose. "Scared already?" Emily took the letter, folded it once, and tossed it in the trash. "Let them come." She pointed to the flood of emails on the garage desktop. Requests from schools, hospitals, veteran centers. "We have work to do." That evening, the crew gathered on the roof. They didn't have champagne, just cold cola and a hot skyline. Jake leaned against the railing, arms crossed, watching the city breathe. Emily joined him. "You know what I see?" He raised an eyebrow. 1,000 broken things waiting to be made whole again. Jake looked at her. "Let's fix them." Jake found it the next morning, parked next to the garage. Another truck, but this one wasn't his. Brand new, built from the ground up, tools mounted custom rig, sleek, black, and red. Lettering on the side. Fix Forward 02. He stared, then turned, and saw Emily watching from across the lot. "You built another one?" he asked. She nodded. "And 5 more are in production." Jake blinked. "How?" "I sold the patents," she said. "All of them. My share of Wexford Tech." Jake's mouth opened, but no sound came. "I didn't want to build for stockholders anymore," she added. "I wanted to build for people." He stepped toward her. That's everything you had." "No," she said, looking at him. "Really looking. You are." And then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Jake froze. "I'm not asking for forever," she said softly. "I'm asking for something together." He opened it. Inside, not a ring, a silver pendant shaped like a wrench, tiny engraving inside. "Fix what matters." Jake closed the box, holding it close, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself hope. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a crooked porch light that flickers when the wind blows too hard. But it was his. Jake stepped inside, the key still warm in his hand. The smell of fresh lumber mingled with old Detroit air. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't flawless, but like everything Jake built, it was true. Emily stood at the threshold, watching as he ran his hand along the frame of the kitchen doorway. "It's not much," she said. Jake turned to her, a soft grin on his face. "It's everything." The living room had a fireplace, one Jake insisted on repairing himself. The garage out back was already half-stocked with tools, and beside the front door he'd bolted a plaque into the brick. "Fix Forward HQ." Neighbors dropped by all week, dropping off food, spare parts, and welcome notes. Kids waved from their bikes. Local veterans offered help setting up the garage. This time, Jake wasn't invisible. He belonged. Emily moved in quietly, no boxes, no fanfare, just her sketchbooks, her tablet, and a mug that read, "CEO of Second Chances." They built a rhythm. Morning coffee, late-night designs, weekend fittings. They didn't rush anything. They didn't need to, because real things, lasting things, take time to build. And they had all the time in the world. The private jet waited on the old airstrip, engines off, sun gleaming off its pearl-white wings, not for an escape, but for a new beginning. Emily and Jake stood inside the hangar nearby, surrounded by blueprints, supply crates, and 7 newly built mobile garage units, each destined for a different city. Fix Forward had grown, from 1 truck in a scrapyard to a nationwide revolution in care, dignity, and custom-built mobility. Reporters had stopped calling, the hype had faded, but the work, the good work, never stopped. Jake checked the fit of a wheelchair meant for a child in Phoenix. Emily reviewed training packets for new apprentice crews in Baltimore. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Then, in the golden silence of that sun-drenched hangar, Jake turned. "Everything we built," he said, "we built with love in the bolts." Emily smiled. "And a little blood on the threads." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Before all this, before you, I'd forgotten what it felt like to believe in something that believed in me back. Emily didn't answer. She just leaned in and kissed him. Not like a movie kiss, but like the final turn of a wrench. Solid, sure, complete. 1 year later, the garage hadn't changed much. Still smelled like rubber and machine oil. Still had the dented red toolbox in the corner. Still had the creaky stool Jake swore he'd replace, and never did. But now a wall of photographs stretched across the back. Dozens of lives. Kids laughing in custom wheelchairs. Veterans hugging their mechanics. Families smiling behind vehicles once thought unsalvageable. Each photo had a small caption built with purpose. Jake stood at the bench helping a nervous teenage girl adjust the handlebars on her new chair. Her name was Emma, quiet, sharp, shy. Her mother had tears in her eyes, but Jake stayed focused. "The chair doesn't matter if it doesn't fit you," he said gently. He adjusted the tilt, loosened a bearing, watched how Emma moved, then smiled. "Better," she nodded. The door opened behind him. Emily walked in, hand resting on her baby bump, her other hand holding a clipboard. "Are you ready for the ribbon cutting?" she asked. Jake chuckled. "Always ready." He turned to Emma. "Remember," he said, kneeling beside her, "this isn't just about fixing wheels. It's about making sure you move how you were meant to." Emma's smile said it all. Later, as the sun dipped low over Detroit, Jake and Emily stood outside the new training center next door, a modern space built beside the original garage, now bustling with apprentices, learning the craft. On the wall behind them was a mural, Jake handing a wrench to a child, Emily sketching beside him, a bright red fix-forward unit behind them. Below it, a quote, "The best things we build aren't things at all." Jake turned to Emily. "Think they'll remember us?" She looked out at the sea of laughter, wheels spinning, tools clanking. "They won't have to," she said. "They'll feel it."